Welcome to the Victoria Anarchist Book Fair's week of podcasts featuring local, national, and international activists and authors. Due to the ongoing global pandemic, the Book Fair Collective decided to move their event online again this year. So for the second year in a row, From Embers is teaming up with the Victoria Anarchist Book Fair to release presentations over our podcast platform. Recordings of these voices of resistance were conducted on unceded Indigenous territories across so-called British Columbia and beyond. For more information about the book fair and a full schedule of online events this week, check out victoriaanarchistbookfair.ca, and listeners in the Victoria area are encouraged to visit Camas Books at 2620 Quadra Street or online at camas.ca for anarchist publications and more. And to find out more about our regular anarchist podcast, go to fromembers.libsyn.com or simply search From Embers in your favorite podcast app.
The Victoria Anarchist Book Fair Collective would like to acknowledge the interview you are about to hear took place on unceded WSÁNEĆ and Lekwungen territories of so-called Victoria, BC, and on the traditional territories of the Lil'wat, Chianu, Cowichan, and Chemainus First Nations. My name is Frond. I'm lucky to have interviewed 5 blockaders, Arvind Singh, Strawberry, Driftwood, Bozo Sapien, and Holly, who make it their business to occupy logging roads in defense of the ancient coastal rainforest ecosystem on the invitation of Pacheedaht Elder Bill Jones. At the time of this recording, it's day 424 of continuous direct action on Pacheedaht and Ditidaht territory, with a total of 1,108 arrests. Thank you all for listening, and please enjoy the interviews.
I'm Arvind Singh. I'm a freelance photographer and videographer based out of Victoria, specifically Metchosin on unceded Chianu First Nation Beecher Bay territories. Moved to Canada about 2 years ago. I'm Indian, or I'm mostly Indian, and my mom lives in India now. I grew up in Southeast Asia. I connected to the blockades last summer, pretty much because I was really interested in taking a epic shot of Big Lonely Doug. And I went to a tree climbing workshop. And from that tree climbing workshop around August, a couple of folks went and started the blockades. I wasn't one of them, but I had some hesitations around First Nations consent and stuff like that. And when I figured out some things, I started going to the blockades.
Do you remember the month that you started going to the blockades?
Yeah, it was pretty early on. Might be like late August.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would have been like the founding of River Camp, and people were probably just thinking about what to do for winter. And
I wasn't involved enough to know about like all those things. My contributions were mostly just going and taking firewood and chocolate. I remember asking, hey, what do you guys need? And Shambhu had said chocolate and firewood. So I would go up on the weekends and just take chocolate and firewood.
And you're saying that you felt like a kind of a peripheral member of this operation?
Totally. So I wasn't really. I would go up and it would just be mostly hanging out. Like there was a lot of music, campfire, singing, and just enjoying time out there and connecting with the people and feeling like, let's support this in a little way, however we can. And that was pretty much the pattern up until KCUS started.
Do you want to describe a little bit what KCUS is?
Oh, yeah. So most of those camps, right, like Waterfall, Ridge, HQ, River, they're all protecting this one specific watershed at Aids on Pacheedaht territories. KCUS is about, I would guess, 2.5 hours away on Ditidaht territories. It felt really remote and small compared to Fairy Creek. There was a whole kind of like production at Fairy Creek, right? Like so many people. By the time we were going to KCUS, in February or March, I can't remember exactly. But by the time we were going up there, Fairy Creek had become this big thing. And I would go there with MJ, my wife, and my puppy Denali, and we wouldn't really find like a use, This was before enforcement started. And there wasn't really much for us to do. But at KCUS, we were like, okay, we could be useful here. So it was a much smaller community. And there was still a lot of work to be done when we started putting down roots. There was like, a lot of building and a lot of different scheming and frontline roles. Anything that was exciting and cool, like I was like, okay, let's film this with the consent of the people involved. But like the day I met you, I was filming the extraction of the cookie.
That's right.
The 2-ton, 800-year-old slice of a fir from a stump that had been cut down previously. And that was a big production. That was pretty exceptional to be a part, to see. A lot of ingenuity and also a lot of risk, like personal risk, to harvest this slice and transport it using the bare minimum of equipment, right? Like in India, we have this saying called jugaad, which is like doing something with like just improvising with the bare minimum of equipment, like turning a scooter into something that can crush your wheat. So like, just jerry rigging it up in your. I think in Canada there's a phrase similar, like MacGyvering things.
That's right.
Yeah, so I basically was quite exciting to just see this MacGyvering of this thing, so we could transport this cookie to the bridge, and I was filming that.
So, were you there when police enforcement began?
Yeah, so we spent. I remember that morning, my wife had been the LO, and the DLTs had visited, and they had been coming pretty regularly. And they had said, hey, you guys have 24 hours. And tomorrow at 8 a.m., the police come in and they're going to go through this camp and anybody here will be arrested. And we had been preparing for this, right? And the week before had been so full of anticipation that this wasn't a surprise, but it was like finally like, okay, like now these muscles that have been trained can actually start moving. And yet still there was like also a little bit of a crisis, because things like the Starlink had to be set up in the back with power, battery packs, and it was raining horribly. And I remember that day just getting absolutely drenched and just freezing my ass off and getting like 2 hours of sleep, being out there through the night kind of thing. Like everybody was. I think there were so many people just who got soaked doing things. And then when the police rolled in, MJ and I, we started driving out. So as the cops were coming in, we were driving out, and it was just this like really heart-wrenching thing, because we weren't planning to be arrested. We were pretty much evacuating while leaving our friends behind, and we were part of this convoy. And it was so surreal leaving behind this place, and just having police take down our name and our number and our car license. And it really felt like, oh my God, we'll never be able to go back, because they know everything, and it was just a bit scary and sad. But within 2 days I was back there, and that chapter dragged on for quite a bit of time. But I remember really viscerally the day enforcement started, and all the people who had come to camp to support, people who had never been there, but just like overnight we had like 15 or 20 new people ready to chain themselves into gates and dragons and things.
And so you said you came back, right? Do you want to talk about like what you witnessed when you came back?
Sure. So I came back because I was on assignment with the PBS documentary. So I had legitimate grounds to be there, and the RCMP at that point weren't being shits about media access. So we went in. They still had those ridiculous exclusion zones, right? But what would happen was you would meet up at a point somewhere near Honeymoon Bay or something, and then you would convoy in with the MRO, and you would be escorted into Kekus. And that was very surreal, driving into Kekus as part of this big convoy. And at some point, the cars would all park on the side of the road, and there'd be some bureaucratic thing that the cops had to go through amongst themselves. And then the helicopter would just land like 100 or 50 feet, or I was in a car that was pretty close to what they were using as a heli landing site. And then to see that level of enforcement, I was like, wow, what is going on? There's a helicopter. That was not something I had anticipated to see, or I hadn't thought about, but it was jarring to see it. It was it was so close. And a lot of the trucks, the RCMP trucks, when they opened the doors, you would be able to see they had assault rifles perched between the two front people in the cab, and it was just it was a bit of a jarring feeling, like, because we had all talked about what enforcement would look like, and in our heads it was maybe some naivety, but there was like it was going to be a kind of a co-production of a theatrical performance that would we would broadcast around the world to draw attention to this thing. That's kind of how people conceived it, and the prospect of helicopters and assault rifles, that didn't fit with that vision. And so we drove in, and it was still not violent up on, at that point. We got in, and there was an exclusion zone, but you could see what was going on. Even if it was like 100 or 200 meters away. In one case, it was 200 meters away. But they were pretty strict about keeping the media away from the enforcement area. And there was a little bit of camaraderie amongst the photographers and the media people there. There was already, even at that point, like day one or day two, I think this is day two, a split between mainstream and the independent media. I remember, being pretty disappointed. At one point, there was the MRO, there was a person being extracted at a distance like 200 meters away, and all the independent, like myself and a few of the independents were like, hey, we want to hear what they have to say. We want to record it and film it, and we had a little bit of a satellite thing to live stream it. And the mainstream media just were not bothered, and CBC, Czech, CTV, these folks, they all lined up their cameras on tripods, and they just interviewed the MRO, who made a statement, and then they left. And they asked permission to leave early because they had kind of got their story, and they were like, they had a long day ahead and they just wanted to go. And so they had to actually be escorted out earlier than planned. The RCMP were like, oh, you want to leave early? Okay, we'll make it happen. And they just got escorted out. Whereas the rest of us were just kind of out there being like, hey, this is ridiculous. We want to actually interview the person who's being extracted. And so that was the pattern. It was pretty frustrating. It was like a stage managed access. So you could only see, limited things. And there was a sense that whenever there was a high risk extraction, like the person might have got hurt. And touchwood, at that point, anybody did at Kekus. But if there had been a risk of that, then certainly they wouldn't have allowed cameras during the process. And that's what it felt like. Like anything that was important to film, we weren't allowed to film.
Well, my name is Cheyenne. My camp name is Strawberry. I am, I guess I'm an Afro-Indigenous land defender. I've been out at Fairy Creek. I was out at Fairy Creek for I guess over 4 months full time. I didn't leave. I think I went for a couple supply runs, but it's usually for camp. So, and it's quite a bit of a mission to get over from Fairy Creek to here. So, yeah, I lived out there. This is my first time back at my house.
Wow.
Sleeping in a bed and being in a house for a long time.
I'm curious, which of the blockades was the one that you started at?
I actually just started at HQ. I came in and I spent some time at HQ and just trying to get situated. So I kind of have like a bit of a different story. Over the last 3 years, I've been I've had a neurological disease. So it affects kind of like my mobility and my speech. I couldn't talk for 10 months. And then, so when I came to Fairy Creek, I have a lot of mobility issues. So I've been kind of in and out of a wheelchair and walker for the last couple of years. So kind of progressing. And so when I got to Fairy Creek, I didn't know how I was going to support being in my state and what I could do. But I kind of felt the need to go. I left kind of like the day after the Kamloops children were found at the residential school there. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So just because of my family and the way that we've been impacted by colonialism, it felt wanted to be there for a long time at Fairy Creek, and also wanted to go up to Wet'suwet'en, but due to the state of my health, I wasn't able to leave. And so I just kind of got up one day and left. And when I got to Fairy Creek, I didn't know like how I would fit in, or like what my role would be, or what it even looked like really to be there, because like, you know, social media doesn't really talk about camp life. It doesn't talk about day to day and what that looks like there. And so when I got to HQ, it was just kind of more trying to get acquainted with like what Fairy Creek was, what it looked like, trying to figure out how I was going to get around from A to B. So that's kind of where I spent my time. And then I ended up leaving from there and going up to River. And I spent, I guess like over 3 months up at River.
Wow.
All over. I mean, I've spent lots of time up at Waterfall, but and all, like supporting as many places as I can. But like I would say my home base was River. That's
right.
I had a permanent location.
Yeah. River's a good place. What is an example of something that represents camp life that the social media presence doesn't really communicate?
Yeah, I would say like the things that I don't see on social media are like how every day like there's just like these group of amazing humans that like get together and they pool all of their resources. Like people are so resourceful at Fairy Creek, and everybody are, you know, the people I've met are coming from all different walks of life, and they're all bringing something different. And so I think that is just something that blew me away, was just seeing how every day people are showing up to fight for this cause. But it was more of a cause, instead of being in this colonial world where we're just like working and operating and being on these schedules, just seeing people showing up and volunteering and using their time. But people, the way that people communicate and the way that people come together is different than when we're out in the colonial world, when we have to work and we have to show up, we have to do these things. It's like this, it's a different force behind it, where like at Fairy Creek, it's like we want to be there. We're like there for the trees, the ecosystem, for land back. We're fighting for, you know, Indigenous sovereignty and all of the things. But, you know, at home, it's a different situation. And out there, everybody's, you know, when we volunteer for our jobs every day, we sign up, we do the things, and it's a different, you know, we take respite. My friends are always ensuring, like, are you taking care of yourself? Do you need anything? And just like this solid community of people checking in. And as I mentioned, my health issues. And so having people just seeing I'm not feeling well, like bringing me food to my tent, and just seeing the kindness and the compassion that people have for each other, and how hard everybody works, and music and creativity and and the arts and all of the things that, you know. Also, like, I came to Fairy Creek within 3 days of being there. People are like, I kind of voiced it was hard to get to a bathroom. So like within like a couple of days of being there, an accessible bathroom was built for me at HQ. And then it was, you know, here, you need a handicap parking spot by the kitchen. They made me my own spot. And
right.
You know, the things that we don't really hear about, you know, and that means a lot, you know? Yeah.
Like, for a voice to be heard and for a reaction to be so fast. I mean, like that. Yeah. That's not something that society here, so-called Victoria, that's not something that this place is really set up to have. Yeah.
Right. It's the same thing here. Ableism, and when people don't think about these things. But, yeah.
Were you present at all while Waterfall was defending itself against industry and RCMP?
Yep. Definitely. I spent some time up at Waterfall. When I came in, I had a friend, a really kind, compassionate friend that helped me get into Waterfall. So we hiked in, and I spent lots of time up there supporting. I also was locked into a dragon and arrested up there. We had many people supporting us while we were there, bringing us food, making sure we were comfortable. And then when enforcement finally arrived, we were met with some pretty this crew that and enforcement was pretty, I would say they were pretty violent. And so when we were getting extracted at the last second, one of our friends jumped on top of the log that we were on. So he ended up walking in at the last second. And so we ended up having an extra person, and just the way that our enforcement came up and just started. So the first person they went for was my friend that was on top of the log. They just violently kind of like ripped him off. And then they kind of came for me next. And so I'm 5 feet. I weigh like 125 pounds. I'm fairly small. And with enforcement kind of like trying to like rip me out, I was, I had my bracelet around my wrist. And so they kept trying to pull me out. And then they kind of threw me back on my back. And I remember just trying to kind of go back and kind of curl up, and then them throwing me back. And then I had 5 enforcement officers. I had one crushing my chest. I had a knee in my chest, a knee in my stomach, and then 3 knees on my leg. And I remember yelling for them to get off because I couldn't breathe. And
wow.
And my 2, there may have been another BIPOC person in the flower behind, but in that immediate area I was the only BIPOC person. And so I just remember my friends yelling, my 2 friends who are white identifying yelling at the cops to get off of me and get off. And so it ended up kind of being a bit of a violent way for them to kind of get me into handcuffs. It felt very violating and super unnecessary. I mean, I'm 5 feet. It does not take like 5 grown male officers.
I'm sorry to hear that, like, it was so targeted. That's something that we hear a lot about the RCMP's behavior. Waterfall, like, may have been this strategic position. When I was there this time last year, and it was more about, like, making sure there were enough people to actually be there to, like, protect the totes. Like there'd be like totes with crackers in them or something, and we just needed to make sure that there were enough people there. But maybe I'm curious to hear your perspective. Why Waterfall became such a in some sense it became like symbolic.
Oh yeah, 100%. So yeah, like for me, when I think about Waterfall, like I think about a couple different things. Like I think about a location that enforcement was never able to take. They were never able and still have not taken Waterfall. We have lost all protection camps and still Waterfall is still standing. So for me, like, it's just like when I think about Waterfall, I just think about like the power and like the power of the people and like how it never stopped and it didn't matter. Like, I remember the first time I got to Waterfall, I was just like in awe because it's like we hiked in and come into the Screech kitchen and just like it was a beautiful huge kitchen and everybody's working, and then like looking around trying to figure it out, and all you can hear are people working. It's just like people digging and like building, and it doesn't stop. It goes all day, it goes all night, and there's people cooking all day and all night to ensure that these hardworking people are fed with all this like super nutritious food, but made with love. Like people are literally pouring everything into this, like everything. There's just something so beautiful and compassionate. Like just it is iconic because of that, and it's never been taken. Music, like, people are always singing and like.
HQ got hit really, really hard. Were you present for that?
So I was up at River, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so I was actually supposed to leave that day, and I was supposed to go be part of an action at the legislature that day. And I was supposed to get locked in to the legislature in like a bike lock around my neck. And so I'm literally going to leave only to hear that HQ is literally being raided right now. And so at that moment, I was like, oh my God, so we're locked in. I've got my daughter. waking up that morning, getting ready to leave, only to hear that like HQ had been taken, and had all of these things going through my mind. And that was the beginning of probably some of the most traumatic times I've experienced. Things are so different at Fairy Creek now. Like, there's still amazing people and everybody's still pooling and working, but like that was the last of like this, not of Fairy Creek, but like
I think I know what you mean.
Like a lot of the culture and the camp living and life that we had, what I was calling my home at that time. You know, the fall of the mountain, of holding the space for all of the mountain. And I mean, there's still people at the ridge, there's still people at Waterfall, you know, and there's people living in the trees and trying to make things work. But it was different. It was you know, when I think about that time, I think about like this, just like, you know, this heavy darkness. And I just think like, yeah, there's just like heaviness that happened. And the cops became even more violent. They were already violent, and especially to BIPOC.
Yeah, so there's something.
I don't want to like get into
no.
But, like...
No, but you're like you're so on it. There's something that is so like supportive, like on an intellectual level, but also on a spiritual level, about the autonomous community. Hey Haka, for example, like so many blockaders I know were created at Hey Haka in the way that I was created at Ridge Camp, you know, and then I saw the momentum created by people from Hey Haka carry the movement. It really hurts to see the support structure for that crushed.
And crushed in such an evil way. Like, I just also want to say that, like, you know, not just crushed, there's just like this evilness as well. Like, and I don't want to like bring like be that person, but I also am such a realist that like without the crazy reality, because these are the things that are haunting me, that are haunting my friends. Yeah, like I don't know.
The injunction, right? Okay, so like the injunction expires, and then Judge Thompson decides not to renew it, and then like that decision gets over. So there's like a lot of stuff about this injunction, you know? Does that really factor into the way that you're experiencing this movement?
I have many feelings about the injunction. You know, for me, it's just a colonial force, a military colonial force. And when I look at it all from the top down, it really bothers me when I think about it and see it in that light, because I've been on the receiving end of it. I've been arrested at Fairy Creek 6 times. I've been violently arrested every fucking time. Excuse my language. I swear sometimes, I swear a lot. But I've been, and so for me, when I think about it from the top down, it's just like, I just see these like people with money, like this rich force of just like wanting something so bad, and then being able to use that money to be able to get what they want. And the government backs, the courts back. And then my people are getting violently beat and brutalized because of the injunction. So when I think about the injunction, it brings up a lot of emotion, it triggers a lot of trauma, you know, because for me, I'm being labeled as a criminal when I'm out protecting a forest, unceded land. And when I think about like, you know, being home and all I do is dream about people screaming, my friends' screams in my dreams, because we're protecting a fucking forest, and the brutalization that comes because of an injunction, you know. And I'll say for a moment, you know, I celebrated and I was like, oh my God, like the injunction. And because for me, what that meant in that moment was that enforcement wasn't going to be able to brutalize my friends, because when I came home and started, and I'm still processing, I have still a long way to process. So now the injunction's back, and we will see what happens. Do I think anything's going to change? I've lost everything. My car needs to be completely repaired right now from the damages that they've done. So when I think about everything, will they stop doing these things? No. Am I triggered in this moment right now? Yes. You know? And
so where do you hope that this would go? You know, like in a year from now, like where might you hope all this momentum that we have, where would it be good to see that go, in your opinion?
It's a good question. So the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about, is land back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, right, the government right now has done a shady thing by, making this one-time cash grab. And for me, it's like the government not doing their job. They're letting T.L. Jones just like, dangle this little money. So the first thing I think about is like land back, because to me, I know that for sure there are a couple people, especially in this like colonial electoral band council bullshit. Sorry. I think about it because it's not true. Yeah, it's just that system is a colonial system.
Yeah.
Still a way that the government, this so-called government, created elected chiefs and all of those things. So the first thing that I think about is land back, right? That land is there because if we think about Fairy Creek separate from this being an Indigenous genocide to the land, if we think that's separate, we're wrong, because we're all on stolen land. And so for me, my biggest fight is Indigenous sovereignty and the right to be able to be, when we take away land, we take away culture, we take away tradition, we take that away from the children that are going to be born, the children that are coming, and everything. We take away the knowledge keepers and all of the things. So within that, what happens when we take away, the biodiversity and the ecosystems that live in these forests? So for me, it's like having the land back.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Driftwood. And
how long do you think you've been involved with the Fairy Creek movement?
Since August 15th, 2020.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. It was a beautiful day.
Yeah, it was like a series of beautiful days.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever spend any time at a waterfall?
Not after we were unable to access it without hiking that crazy trail, which I know the trail wasn't crazy, but driving to it was. No, and it was always an intention, but my days would start super early in the morning, and in the middle of the night, I'd be driving my truck up that trail. I just never had, I was always doing something else. It's really fun to hear about the culture that developed at Waterfall and everyone that I met coming out of there. Like, I would often do arrestee support, say, like, or jail support, whatever. I'd go to the ACP some days when people were walking out, and it was like they were coming from a different world. The way that they were interacting with each other and the stuff they had experienced.
When you say that it was like they were coming from a different world, what do you mean?
So, for instance, there was a day when I went to the ACP to pick people up. It was like they were walking out of a different culture. It was like, when you go to the airport and you're picking someone up and they've just come from a big worldwide tour or whatever, like they're coming from another culture and they're kind of just like landing, and sort of you're in two totally different headspaces when you meet at the airport. It was like that, going to pick people up at the access control point, because they were coming out of this world that was happening up there. And I'm just in this routine where I like drive and do chores. I'm not experiencing the magic and the carpentry and the songs and the violence and all this stuff that was compressed into these intense couple of months. I think that was probably pretty changing for a lot of, like, it was affecting for a lot of people. You could tell everybody was affected, you know? Yeah. There was like, anyway, there's this whole other world on the side of the mountain.
One of the things about waterfall that I can't stop thinking about is the RCMP surveillance, right? There was at times there was 24-hour RCMP surveillance there. What I'm curious whether or in what ways you think that the imposition that the RCMP were presenting there, the sort of like authority that they were representing, I'm using quotation marks, what impact that had on this kind of this cultural phenomenon that you're talking about, where this compression, right, this culturally compressed moment, or I don't know how you would, I don't know how better to frame it at this exact moment, but you know what I mean. What was the role that the RCMP played there?
The RCMP created a community by imposing themselves on people. The kind of manipulation and tactics they were using to psychologically and physically traumatize people, that it's so weird, because it seems to me like what happened with all of that is it actually inspired the escalation in tactics that they're all complaining about now in court. That, the listening to Teal's lawyers at the hearing the other day, just talking about the dangerous escalation in tactics that the protesters were using. It was required to stand up to this madness. Like, these guys, yeah.
What you're talking about, I mean, I definitely experienced that. Right when the RCMP started enforcement, they blew through Kaikus, which we had spent months fortifying.
Yeah.
Maybe a month and a half, 2 months. They blew through it in like 3 days. Eden, they blew through it in like a day and a half.
Okay, that was a sad moment.
Yeah. I mean,
because it was so quiet around there. And so can we talk about Eden just for a second?
Yes.
The night before Eden got raided, there was, low numbers there. And a bunch of people came from Eden to HQ to go to the, it's funny to think about it now, these evening meetings, right? These mass, open, hey, everybody come and talk about the plans for the next day in public. And some folks from Eden came to say, we need some help out there. And we made this plan that we were going to have people there by 8 a.m, and they raided at 6:30. Shocking, very heartbreaking part of what happened at Eden. I feel like this has been security culture blockade boot camp. Here's all the things you do wrong. Here's how all the things could backfire. Now, maybe next time we'll be a little more careful or whatever.
Right now, I think things are very decentralized, and it keeps rolling forward. What's the explanation there? Yeah,
I mean, it's funny because I actually went to last Sunday, went to kind of a big group, let's just see where everyone's at. And the most beautiful, hardcore folks who are holding down a certain area are people I don't know at all. And it's amazing. And I just want them what can I do to serve you? You're doing amazing things. So what's the deal there? There's people capable of this amazing stuff, and they have a place to go and do their work. When you and I first met, for instance, most people were fairy what? But now there's just some certain things in place. There's awarenesses. There's getting to waterfall wasn't common knowledge for a while. And now all of a sudden you hear everyone talking about this trail. People know how to get there. People know what's at stake. People know different ways they can work in order to slow things down or stop it altogether. I don't know what's next. I'm just babbling.
Well, yeah. I mean, personally, I've never been more acquainted with a geographic area ever in my life. And when we started blockading, I was just on a road somewhere, and I would I'd do a 360 turn, and I'd just be in the middle of a place. And within a couple of weeks, I started to recognize the the enormity of the learning process. And by like about 8 months, I would say that you could plop me down anywhere in that area. I'd know exactly where I was, and I'd know how to get out. I'd know how to find my way to a thing. And I've never experienced anything like that before, in an area like that. And yeah, I mean, when we talk about why people keep going back, I mean, how many opportunities do we have to really like learn about a place, you know? So I don't know, but, and then you stand in solidarity with people against something like the RCMP, and you feel that way about a place, and you know that they're feeling the same, and that they're standing for the same reasons you are. And there's something pretty profound about that experience.
Yeah. For me, it's been, obviously, I think this is a big one for a lot of people. It's just been like so overwhelmingly profound. I've always understood colonialism was a huge fucking thing that's gone on where we live. But being in a set of woods through seasons, in a place surrounded by people whose lives have been affected for generations, there's just a deeper understanding about it. And like,
probably a lot of people who show up at Fairy Creek have had the experience of being the person in the room who's freaking out about the colonial process of the Canadian National Project, whereas everybody else is just like eating chips, drinking carbonated water or whatever. But if you're in that environment, it's a pretty common experience to relate to somebody else. People probably who felt very confident about their anti-colonial views became students of people who live it in a much deeper way.
Yeah, hi, that's me.
Yeah, I mean, so that is so amazing. Like, yeah, are you going back?
I can't not go. Like, there's a lot of stuff that comes with a bunch of people being in the woods. And I can't just, when I go there, I just want to clean up and like who's doing the firewood run and, you know, that kind of stuff. Yeah, we're at a funny time. Like, I feel like it's fragile and unbreakable all at the same time.
Yeah, anyways, nice to meet you, Frondo. It's Bozo Sapien. Glad I could speak with you. I've been at Fairy Creek about 2 months. What's the date? Yeah, about 2.5 months. Because I came to Fairy Creek for a week, and then I had to go back to where I'm from, and then I came back. So I don't know. It's like I felt the call. So I was here for, I was there for a week in the summer. Everything was cool. Injunction was on, but everyone was chilling at HQ. Like getting more into just doing art, not much so worrying about the blockade aspect. Like I was still down to go on a dragon, and I did a lot of shifts, but like there was time to do some music on the side and some art or whatever, paint. And then literally I remember the day that it all changed. I was just listening to your podcast, the last one, or the one you sent me, and just like talking about how it was the mountain was chilling, and it was chilling in the summer, and then August 9th came around, and then it wasn't chilling, and it was intense. Like I was there. I was at River Camp from August. I was there before August 9th to well into September. I'm like, this interview is honestly going to be a little bit of me processing what has happened, just so that, everyone's aware of that. I've had it's an ongoing thing. It's still like very much so in the forefront of my head. I spent time at Bear's Mouth.
Sorry, and, what is Bear's Mouth?
It was like one of the points where there was like a dragon and like a big wooden thing over the road wooden thing.
Yeah,
like a archway type deal, and the excavator came in there with its bucket and just destroyed the whole thing in like 10 seconds. It was just like I was like, oh. And at that point, I realized hardly anything can stop an excavator. Yeah. Those things are just literal symbols of destruction. Like, fuck.
Yeah, dude.
They offend me. Like the excavator is offensive. Like it's offensive how much like power we think we should be able to harness. It's excessive.
After HQ got raided and the RCMP just started swarming everywhere and they were in the trees and all that stuff, like what was the day-to-day vibe like?
You know, I'll go from the start to the finish. So at the front of the line, you have the people on the front line, either locked into the dragons or soft blocking or building soft blocks or whatever to hold them back. If you're lucky, you'll buy a day and the cops will just leave and do their shift change. Basically, if they can do like one hard block per day. So we always had to have a hard block there and then be building the next one that night so that we could hold them off. But really, I shouldn't even say that. I should say we were just, taking up space. We were just really digging our way for our own seat to sit anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily have to do with, like, ultimately, functionally, we were affecting their ability to move freely on the road. But at the same time, we also affected our own ability to move freely on the road because we had cars above those hard blocks as well. So certain people were trapped in, and there was a block and there was cars on both sides, and one side was a one-way, and then no exit. Block, so you can come up, but once you're in, and it was block, 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 block. So yeah, certain people's vehicles were in the zone. They couldn't even drive out if they wanted to drive out. That was a fucking gong show. Like, there's people living in their vehicles. There's people with disabilities with their vehicle in the exclusion zone. So in terms of morale, it was very up and down because it was like confusion, I would say, was in there, but ultimately a sense that you could probably overcome. And that if we just kept doing what we were doing and didn't think too hard about it and just fended them off, we would last until the injunction was over. Like, we literally had a countdown. I remember it was like, okay, it ends on this day. We just another 5 weeks, just 5 more weeks, and that was about 5 weeks ago. I was looking at a chart today of the S&P 500. And if you haven't looked at an actual chart of it, just a normal price chart, it's something to look at, I also recommend looking at satellite images of the Amazon. Just go ahead and look at that. From space, looking at the Amazon, it is like, I really do encourage you all to go look at it like as soon as possible. Because it's disturbing, Start on Turtle Island, and then zoom out, and then go down to the Amazon and zoom in, and you'll see it. It's disturbing, and it's. I've always thought things got to get worse before they get better, and maybe that's where the anarchy plays into it. Because I don't see how we're going to really move forward too much from this position. Like, you had the Supreme Court of BC sit there for 4 days and argue about if the injunction was viable, if they should let it expire. And then, for an appeal court to then just overturn that ruling in 1 day of hearing people talk, it just clearly isn't serving the greater interest. Like, everybody is pretty much on the same page with this. Like, don't fucking log old growth, like, okay, you're gonna log second and third growth, like, we can handle that. We're not anti second and third growth, we're just anti fucking old growth because there's hardly any left. You have to think a lot about your values and morals and where you stand on things, because it just as time moves on, as things get worse in the world, we're going to have to ask ourselves harder and harder questions. And as those questions get harder, your answers are going to be, you'll need to have them be more affirmed in yourself. Because if you're not on a line, then you will probably will bend one way or the other, because like I said, the questions will get harder as the scenarios start to get harder. Right now, humanity is on easy mode. Easy mode. We're playing the game in easy, but over the next 30 years, we're going to be, that meter is going to fluctuate to hard mode, like if life was a game. And it's going to be systemic. Like we're on systemic easy, you know, and it's going to suck because the whole planet is going to go into systemic even harder, like way harder. Humans seem to have like inherent just like fuck uppery in their DNA. We just really just fuck up a lot and make a lot of mistakes and are very confusing creatures. And in that confusion, all of our material objects that are outside of us get flailed. So like I've flailed some gear. I have no idea. Gear has been flailed. We've all participated in the gear flail because I've seen it. I've done it. You don't mean to, but you know, there's some like obviously some problems with what we're doing at Fairy Creek, but you know, we gotta look at those. But it's a deeper question of humanity itself, because we're just a piece of humanity. So it's like, all of humanity needs to look inside itself and wonder, are we flailing humanity? Like, you know?
My name is Polly. I've been living in British Columbia for just over a year now. Spent a lot of time at Fairy Creek and gotten to know pretty extraordinary bunch of humans, and yeah, you're one of them.
Aw. That's so sweet of you to say. Yep, it's a pleasure to know you as well. I don't think that we did we meet on the front line? I can't remember.
I might maybe pass by you if you were hanging around HQ.
What was your role at HQ? Like what kind of energy do you think you were putting forward there? Or maybe if you weren't spending so much time there, what do you think your primary driving occupation was up there at the blockades?
Oof, honestly, when I first showed up, I had no idea if I was going to stay. I was pretty nervous about it. I kind of thought I'll just come with a food donation. I'll suss it out. I might turn around and yeah, I don't know. And showed up, went through the intake. HQ is the kind of the place where no matter who you are or what experience you've had, there is a job for you there. There's so much going on, you know, whether it's facilitating or if it's doing, you know, computer techie stuff and whatnot. Yeah. And so I really just kind of jumped around. I was in the kitchen for a while doing some cooking and cleaning, you know, and then I was facilitating some of the meetings, with, new folks coming in, just sort of like as a primer. Then I was doing some comms, communication stuff. And shortly after arriving, I think I maybe spent a couple weeks at HQ, and then I ended up doing some recon. And from there, yeah, just started to meet people at the different camps, and then got kind of, you know, taken off to this mission one night up to Waterfall Camp. And then I didn't leave Waterfall for like over a month, I think.
Whoa.
Yeah. When I showed up, I woke up the next day, you know, pretty much no sleep. It's just like pouring rain. It's freezing cold. You're sleeping on top of each other and everything's wet. And it's like I literally couldn't leave because my body was like, I can't move. Like I need time to recover. And it was just this like grindy sort of like, oh, we're here and you can't get out and it's such a far walk to go back. And you just, you know, and then somewhere in it kind of just, you know, loved the grind. Loved it, you know?
Yeah, I know that feeling. It's also like, you know, as we say, like it's a stand. I was feeling it when I was getting arrested, where I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing, and I am going to do this. And, you know, I'm not going to think about where I need to be today or anything like that. What was that process like, the day-to-day process that just had you grounded in that location?
Oof. Yeah, I don't know. You wake up and you just don't know the time of day. You have no idea what time of day it is at any given time. If you did bring your phone with you, or if someone had a phone, like shortly, it would be dead. The only person, who could tell you the time of day and kind of any updates from the outside world was the comms person. And, generally there just wasn't much coming through. And really it was just sort of huddling around a fire together a lot of the time, and then prepping the next meal. And everything takes so long when you're out in the bush. It just, everything, you're in the moment, you're in the process. And that's what I really loved about it, was everything was just so centered around each other and our processes.
I gotta ask this. Okay, so like there's the sort of like a broad media narrative, but the Fairy Creek blockade like movement or campaign or however you want to call it, like it has its own kind of media representation, right? How it represents itself to itself, right? Like the updates and so on. Right. Is there anything about like being out on the front lines that you think gets left out, or something that maybe gets lost through the channels of communication that lead to like a social media post?
Right. Oh my goodness, this is this is a good question. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure that there's tons. And honestly, Simon, like just what we were talking about before, when you are so in the moment and you're grounded and you're just focused on kind of getting through the day and staying warm and staying dry, and getting another hard block in the ground and making sure we have some arrestables to get in them. And so not even having any sort of reference point of like what are the media posts recently, what have they been saying about waterfall? Is waterfall getting covered? It was just sort of like most of the people on the ground there we weren't worried about it. We were just fighting the fight and trying to stay on that mountain for another day. I don't know, there's something that's just not as real about it to me as being on the ground. Does that kind of make sense, or that sort of answers the question?
Is there something maybe like sacred about that experience that can't be reflected through such an alienated medium?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Like there's we had some incredible photographers come up, and I've seen some short documentary films that folks have made, and I've seen some of the images, and they're absolutely astonishing. And they really do like kind of some of those images, it's like time stops, and I look back at them and I'm like, oh yeah, wow, it brings up so much. But even that, like, it doesn't entirely like encapsulate what that time was like. You have to like really be there, like in human form, like go and take the walk and stand with us. And I think that, if there could be some way of, channeling that, and I don't know through what platforms, but just that message of like, actually be here, come be with us. For me, the calling was just something has to give. Something's got to give. We are at such a weird and precarious time as human beings on this planet. I think really it was kind of answering the call to my inner child. Yeah, I guess I would say my soul, and the voice inside that says something has to give. You have to stand for something. Pick one thing, pick a couple different things if you can handle it all at the same time. And just having that faith and trust that others were going to stand up beside me, and others are going to be standing up about other things, other issues, whether you're standing for old growth, whether you're standing beside Indigenous people of any nation, when you're standing with Indigenous people in Canada, you're standing up with Indigenous people internationally, whether it's whatever your cause is, whatever your injustices that you're facing in your life, you can do something about it. And direct action is just, blown my mind and opened up my whole world as to what we can do as human beings when we get our shit together and organize. Honestly, like if we do want to save our planet, this has got to be way bigger than Fairy Creek. This has to be way bigger. People actually have to, get out of their 9 to 5 for once and get on the streets, start walking together. That's what I hope for. And I hope that in that, we can successfully organize like we've done at Fairy Creek and, come together for common good.
Holly, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with me this morning.
Thank you so much, Simon. It's been awesome to chat with you, and look forward to spending more time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
For talking to me, Bozo Sapien. I'm really glad we got to talk.
Word, okay, well, we'll keep in touch.
Driftwood, thank you for taking the time to have this conversation with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me participate.
Arvid, I don't think that there are too many people who could really tie a lot of this together like you can.
It's been great. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, have a good day, hey?
Yeah, buddy. Bye.
Right on. Take care. It's an honor. Thank you so much, Strawberry, for taking some time to talk with me in this conversation here.
Oh, thank you. I'm so blessed. I'm so glad this happened.
I hesitate to ask you to take any more time. You've given me so much. Is there anything else that you feel needs to be said?
Abolish the government and the RCMP.
Yeah. Fuck the colonial state.
Fuck the colonial fucking state. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
Land back.
Silver Threads, Still Walking, Still Waking is co-hosted by me, Carla Bergman.
And me, Eleanor Goldfield. This is where we interview long-term organizers and radicals about their watershed moments, what they've learned along the way, and how they maintain their hope on this path, dreaming and building emergent worlds for a present and future anchored in justice and freedom for all.
Because there are forks in the road, but they all lead us home, to the fight, to the build.